What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and the Giants are playing the Dallas Cowboys tomorrow afternoon. It's going to be a bloodbath, supposedly. That's what Las Vegas is saying. I think that the Giants are the biggest underdogs of the season so far. I think that the spread is 16.5 points or something crazy like that. I don't have high hopes going into this game. Tommy DeVito making his first start of his NFL career against a very good Dallas Cowboys team and defense in particular with a great pass rush. Last time we faced the Cowboys, we all know how it went. Week 1, prime time, 40 points to 0. It wasn't pretty. It was really, really ugly. And I think that it's going to be more of the same. But right now, the Giants, man, 2-7, likely headed to 2-8. Right now, they hold the 3rd overall pick in the draft. There's a lot of speculation. What are they going to do come draft time? What can they do to develop some of these young players on the roster right now before the end of the season? There's a whole lot to discuss, and all of you left some questions for us to discuss in today's episode, a fan mailbag episode. If you want to be featured in the next fan mailbag, make sure to stay tuned to our social media channels. Mine at Anthony_Rivardo on X. Of course, Alex Wilson. I'm sure you all follow him by now at Alex Wilson ESM. And then, of course, follow our Fireside Giants social media channels. They're all at Fireside Giants. Leave some questions for us, and we'll, of course, shout you out and go over your questions, which we're going to do in today's episode. But before we dive into some of your questions, make sure to like if you do enjoy this episode, subscribe to the channel if you are new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the first question today, Alex. This one comes from at Neal Unrealist on Twitter/X. He says, what do you think about the Giants moving Evan Neal to guard and signing a decent free agent right tackle like a Trent Brown in 2024 rather than rolling the dice on another draft pick for a tackle? And I think that this is a really good question, and it kind of ties into another topic that I wanted to bring up with you, Alex. I read a mock draft this morning on PFF. It was a 5-round mock draft. The Giants went with Olu Fashanu out of Penn State at offensive tackle. He's a left tackle, but in this mock draft, they drafted him, moved him to right tackle, and it was written in the mock draft, in this scenario, they take Fashanu and they move Evan Neal to right guard, which is, of course, what Neal Unrealist is asking us. Do we think that Evan Neal could move to right guard? I think it's easier said than done. I'll give some of my take on this before I let you dive into it, Alex. I think moving a player from tackle to guard, we've seen it happen before. Eric Flowers was an absolute bust with the Giants. Moved to guard for the Commanders, for the Miami Dolphins as well. Started to have a pretty decent career at the guard position. Sometimes it works out. Other times it doesn't. Other times a bad NFL player is just a bad NFL player, and it doesn't matter where you move them. They don't really figure it out. And I don't really know what Evan Neal is just yet. He's only in his 2nd season. Is he just a bad NFL player? Maybe, but maybe he could move over to guard. I do think that it's something that the Giants need to toy with. It's an idea that they need to start considering because he's not really showing signs of life at right tackle. He doesn't really show signs that he's going to turn things around and live up to the expectations of being the 7th overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft. So in my eyes, I think that this is something that the Giants consider. I think this is a good idea by Neal Unrealist here, moving Evan Neal to guard next season. I think he has to earn it. It has to be a competition at right guard. He doesn't get given the job, but he has to earn that right guard spot, and I would like to see the Giants go into free agency and look for an offensive tackle, a quality starter. I know that I mentioned that on the channel recently, Alex. I'm a big advocate for the Giants going after a veteran offensive lineman to bolster this unit rather than rolling the dice on another top 10 offensive lineman. I think that going for a offensive tackle in free agency and hopefully moving Neal to guard is a really good idea. But what is your take on it? How do you think about kind of that idea of maybe moving Neal inside and signing a veteran offensive tackle?
When it comes to Evan Neal, my friends, this is very reminiscent of the Eric Flowers situation. And we forced Eric Flowers to keep playing in a position that he clearly was not capable of playing. And then he ended up going to the Washington, Commanders, essentially. And then he ended up being pushed into guard, and he had a pretty couple of years there. You know what I mean? The Giants need to be proactive with what they think is going to set themselves up to have a competent player at any given position. Mark Lewinsky, see you later. Sayonara. He's gone. Right guard, are we really going to trust that Marcus McKethan is going to step up? Is Justin Pugh going to come back next year? Ben Brett, you know what I mean? Like, I don't really know. Their situation at right guard is also problematic for the future. The most obvious move here is to move Evan Neal into the inside. And the reason I think he would be better there is one simple thing. He loses on the outside because of speed. He loses on the outside because opposing pass rushers are faster than him to get out to the outside. He can't get back into his stance fast enough. He's beat on those speed rushes routinely. I think that's ultimately where we can say to ourselves, if you push him into right guard, you can't beat him with speed. You have to use brute force, brute strength, like traditional pass rush moves to beat him inside, stunts, whatnot. Communication obviously is going to be key in that facet, but I think that his build is better suited for guard in the future, at least, just because that size, that power, that stuff translates, and I think that he can be a fine player in that regard. I mean, for goodness sake, Will Hernandez is having a pretty good year, or at least he started out well. I haven't seen his numbers in a while, but he is just a brute strength guy. Like, he is just a freaking anchor. And that is what Evan Neal is. He's a freaking anchor. He's not a speed type of offensive tackle where you watch Andrew Thomas. He's capable of getting to the outside so quickly. His reaction timing is elite. His kick step is elite. His flexibility is elite. Everything about what he is able to do at left tackle, you wish to God that Evan Neal could do, but he's just so, it almost looks like he's kind of like a spring that's been condensed. Like, he just can't bounce out of that. So I do believe that he better suits for guard. Now, as you mentioned, the question is, how do you replace Evan Neal? How do you put a player there that's going to be competent at right tackle? There's a couple avenues, right? There's 3 traditional ways. You trade for a player, you sign a player, or you draft a player. I am of the group of people that believes that you should be drafting offensive linemen, specifically tackles, every single year. Every year. You should draft them at least in the mid-round. You should draft an offensive tackle, because if you develop a player and eventually you're going to hit on one, you're going to hit on somebody, and you get a competent guard, a competent tackle somewhere in the draft, you're in really good shape. I think a 3rd-round pick on an offensive tackle is worthwhile to take a flyer on, just because you're getting, like, not the cream of the crop, but you're getting guys with upside that may have struggled to a degree. Maybe you're getting a specific scheme fit type of player that you want to build around and see if you can develop into a good quality starter. If you look at all the players around the league, yes, there's a lot of high draft pick, 1st-round picks in offensive lines, but that's not sustainable. Like, you need to hit on mid-round picks. Like, that's the only way to build, NFL teams, is to hit on those 3rd-round picks, hit on those 4th-round picks, hit on those 5th-round picks. That's what builds out the depth. That's where you find some unlikely starters. For example, Micah McFadden, 5th-round pick, he's going to be a starter for this team for a very long time. You know what I mean? So you look at some of these players, you can't only build a team around 1st-round and 2nd-round draft picks. You got to hit on the mid-rounds, and I think that ultimately the Giants, I don't think they should go after. And look, this is a good debate to have, Anthony, and I think this is something that a lot of people are very, very concerned about. Drafting a rookie quarterback. People are asking themselves, and it's a worthwhile question to ask, because we've seen this kind of be a trend for the Giants for a decade now. How are you going to draft a rookie quarterback if you don't have a good offensive line, right? That's a question a lot of people are asking. So I think it's worthwhile to discuss. The fact that the Giants, this year, have been really decimated by injury. I think Andrew Thomas is a star, right? Your left tackle position is solved. That's the most important one. John Michael Schmitz is going to be a very solid player. I have very high hopes for him. I think Ben Bredeson is more than competent at left guard. I don't think he's great at right guard. He really got beat up last week a bit, but he's a good left guard. Right guard and right tackle, those are the big things, but if you move Evan Neal to right guard, I think he could be at least average, and that you can survive with average at guard positions. Then you have right tackle. I don't necessarily think that a rookie quarterback would be stepping into a spot that would be really, really bad for him. I think the line has looked actually not terrible the last 2 weeks. They've actually stepped up and looked decent at times. Specifically last week, Tommy DeVito just held onto the ball so long that a lot of those sacks were kind of on him. But, Anthony, when you're looking at the situation, are you worried that, if you draft a rookie quarterback, they're going to be put in a spot where their development is stunted, as we saw with Daniel Jones, for example, where the offensive line was so bad that he just could not get rid of some of those bad traits, those bad habits. And in fact, it probably created more bad habits. Are you worried that could be something that the Giants do face if they do draft a rookie quarterback?
Personally, no, because honestly, I reflect on Daniel Jones' rookie season, and I don't think that the offensive line absolutely made him a terrible player. He was pretty good as a rookie. He threw 26 passing touchdowns. Yeah, he had that fumbling problem. He had a turnover problem for sure. If he didn't have that, though, Daniel Jones' potential was sky high. If he wasn't fumbling the ball every other drive, he could have been something pretty special. And I don't really think that it was the offensive line that necessarily killed him and made him such a bad player. I think over the years it became a problem, and it kind of broke him as a quarterback. But I'm not worried about a quarterback stepping in here and just immediately becoming a bust because the offensive line is so bad. As I've been saying for weeks, I'm hoping that the Giants do draft a quarterback and that they get somebody who elevates the play of everyone around them. There are quarterbacks who make offensive lines look better than they really are. I think Tyrod Taylor, not on the high end of that spectrum, but is a good example of that. The offensive line looked better with Tyrod Taylor there. He had a lower pressure to sack ratio, or rate rather. Daniel Jones is up in the 30 percentage. Tyrod Taylor's in the low 20s and under in most games. He's good at avoiding those sacks and avoiding that pressure, and he created big time throws downfield. And I think that a young rookie quarterback who's got that kind of read high to low mentality, that aggressive push the ball downfield mentality, who's not afraid of the pressure, I think that they can find success. And I think it's just about the Giants finding one of those quarterback prospects to develop who does elevate the play of those around them. Whether you think that's Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr., whoever you think it is, there's a lot of good quarterback prospects in this draft, and a lot of them do have kind of that trait that rise above the bad play of those around them. I mean, I'm watching a lot of Drake Maye film right now. I'm looking at this game against Pitt. Pitt has a great pass rush and a great defense. And, dude, there's dropped passes all over the place. There's blown protections all over the place. The offensive line stinks. And I'm still seeing Drake Maye throw bombs, like 50-yard bombs downfield with pressure right in his face, getting hit as he throws. That guy doesn't care about the pressure. Like, he's just so aggressive, and he's got balls of steel. He makes those throws. And so I think that's what the Giants need here. Just keep patching together the offensive line, developing those young talents, Marcus McKethan, Josh Azidu. Maybe they can be starters one day, and keep adding other veterans to stabilize the offensive line. In the meantime, sooner or later, you're going to get it fixed if you keep taking chances on those middle-round guys. But I think that, waiting an extra year to draft a quarterback because the offensive line isn't good enough is just silly. If there's a great quarterback prospect on the board that you think could change your franchise for a long time, you take him and you figure out the offensive line and build around the quarterback. You don't build around your offensive line, you build around your quarterback. So I think it's backwards logic. But really tying back into what I said about Daniel Jones in his rookie season, having a lot of potential, kind of all that spiraling out of control, he turned into a broken quarterback. Even more than the offensive line, I think you could argue that happened because of the overchange at offensive coordinator across many different seasons, right? I mean, he's had so many different head coaches, offensive coordinators, different play callers. Daniel Jones never had continuity at any point in his career. Last season, first season in Brian Daboll's system, looked great. This season took a big regression. What's the common denominator here? What's the big problem? Is there a scapegoat? Well, NFJF_A-Rod on Instagram last week on our mailbag post commented #fire Kafka. So now I want to get your take on that, Alex. I think this is a good question here. Is this the scapegoat for the Giants in this offseason? We've seen regression from Daniel Jones. We've seen regression from this offense in total. Play calling's been suspect. Hasn't really been an impressive offense. We haven't seen players utilized properly like they were last season. Is Mike Kafka the one to blame? Does he get fired at the end of the year? Or do you think that the Giants need to hold strong here, keep their offensive coaching staff intact, and stop overturning the position every 2 years, really? The offensive coordinator position seems to change. I'm going to give my take on it, and then I want to hear yours. I'll give it quickly, though, and I think, listen, it depends on what the Giants do this offseason. If they're planning on drafting a quarterback, I think that you can go ahead and change the offensive coordinator position, get somebody new to kind of grow with the quarterback. But if they're not planning on changing the quarterback position, don't think they're going to draft someone in the top 5, and they're going to stick with Daniel Jones, keep the continuity. I think it's really, really contingent on what they decide about Daniel Jones' future. That's my take on it. I know Mike Kafka is going to be the scapegoat here, and a lot of people are going to want him fired at the end of the year. If he gets fired at the end of the year, in my opinion, I'm taking that as the Giants plan on drafting a quarterback and restarting the entire offense and rebuilding it from new. But if they don't fire Mike Kafka, I'm going to take it as they're trying to build continuity here for Daniel Jones, and they're maintaining his status as the franchise quarterback. So I want to know your take on that, kind of my idea there about what happens, whether or not they do fire him. And really, do you think that he should be fired by season's end?
It's kind of a funny conversation to have, because if you were to tell me that we were thinking about firing Mike Kafka before the season started, I'd call you freaking crazy. You know what I mean? I'd call you insane. Now we're 9 weeks in. We're heading into week 10, and a lot of people want Mike Kafka gone. And the thing about it is funny is that last year our offense looked good at times. Not saying it was good, but it would look good at times. We managed to work around a lot of deficiencies, whether it was offensive line related, whether it was receiver related, whether it was this or that. We managed to produce some moments of optimism and hope for the future. And it seems like we've completely gone away from all the things that worked for us last year, or opposing teams just figured us out. And here's what I'll say. The injuries to the offensive line have made it impossible for the Giants to compete. And I think that Andrew Thomas going down. Look, week 1 against Dallas, 40-0. That game was awful, but one game doesn't get somebody fired, right? We've seen guys go years of bad games and not get fired. You know what I mean? So I feel as though Mike Kafka getting fired may just it may hurt our offense because now you have a system, you've built this offense, and don't get it twisted. I think Brian Daboll's had a heavy hand in building this offense. You know what I mean? So if you fire Mike Kafka, what are you really accomplishing here? Because the offense is relatively going to stay the same. Brian Daboll's going to keep a lot of the same elements. You're bringing in a new guy who is now going to change a couple of things, still be calling the plays. It's still not going to be Brian Daboll doing everything. Maybe this is a big learning experience for Mike Kafka, and we give him this opportunity to say, we really liked you in year 1. Year 2 looked like absolute trash. But now the offensive line is healthy. You have a rookie quarterback. Let's see if you can bounce back and put together a good year in year 3. I personally am not on the boat of firing Mike Kafka prematurely simply because I think everybody on this team deserves a chance to bounce back from this season. We can't keep carving and churning through offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators and head coaches and GMs. It's not sustainable, guys. We have to give them a chance to bounce back for 1 year. Last year was excellent, in terms of what we achieved with such little talent. I feel like we have to give them a break this year based on the fact that the offensive line, by the time that week 6 rolled around, we had 10 different alignments. We had practice squad players on the offensive line. Daniel Jones was already missing games. Saquon Barkley was already missing games. I mean, what do you expect? Who on earth is going to play call this team to wins? You know what I mean? Who? You tell me. There's no one in the league that was going to get this offense to be even relatively competent with all the injuries and issues at hand. That's not to say that I absolve Mike Kafka of some of the mistakes that he made, because I do think there were some absolute mind-boggling decisions, lack of doing certain things, abandoning the run early. There are variables that I heavily disagree with. However, we weren't winning those games anyway, and that's kind of the honest truth. These games have been out of hand for most of the season. There may be 1 or 2 that we had a chance, and notably the Raiders game. And I feel as though right now we have to ask the Buffalo Bills game. I have to ask ourselves now, is it in our best interest to turn over the offense again? To restart a scheme, or at least turn over a portion of a scheme. And maybe this guy wants more of different players. Maybe a new offensive coordinator is like, I want this, I want that. And now you got to start the rebuild of the foundation to a degree again. We need a little bit of continuity here. I think you give him 1 more season. If he doesn't perform well, yes, you make a change. Maybe you even make a mid-season change. But I think that I'm still willing to give him a chance because it's too soon. You know what I mean? It's too soon. We just faced a sequence of unfortunate events this year that just catalyzed the demise. It was just so everything that could have went wrong. And I think when you look at that, it was almost like this season was the Cowboys game. And I feel as though I don't want to write everybody off just yet. If Brian Daboll's staying and Joe Schoen is staying, I think Mike Kafka deserves 1 more chance too. But again, the leash is definitely shorter. 1 more year of this, even a half a year of this, I think you move on and you don't look back. I think that's kind of my take at this point in time.
I think that's a fair take. I mean, it's wait and see. It's really going to be tough to judge Mike Kafka for the rest of the season with, Tommy DeVito likely starting out the rest of the games. I don't know how you can make a fair determination of how good of a job Mike Kafka has done when he's down to a practice squad level quarterback. So the rest of the season I feel like is a wash. We could definitely judge the first 9 weeks or so. But I think you've got some good points there that maybe it is worth holding on to Mike Kafka if they're definitely holding on to Brian Daboll. Chicken Parm on Twitter, at Chicken Parmesan, asks, why does it never stop? Good question, man. It's been dreadful seasons for sure. Here's a good one that I want to dive into from Tony Terzi at Terzi Talk on Twitter/X. Any indication which one of the top college quarterbacks the Giants have at the top of their list? It would seem logical that if they are all in on 1 or 2 of these quarterbacks, that they would tank the rest of the season. So Tony, I don't think that they're going to tank because that's just not what the Giants do. I think that it's something that the fan base would turn on them for, and they're going to be very careful not to do that. Plus, Joe Shane, Brian Dable, in some ways, they are playing for their jobs. Brian Dable needs to at least show a competitive spirit and not just hand it over to other teams, because with this kind of record and the way that ownership has treated these situations the past few years, I mean, we've had head coach go 2 seasons, fired, 2 seasons, fired, 2 seasons, fired. We don't want to see Brian Dable do that as well. And if he doesn't pick up another win or two down the stretch, his seat gets a little bit warm. If his team doesn't at least compete for the rest of the season, it definitely becomes a hot seat. So they're going to fight. They're not going to tank. But in terms of your other question, any indication of the top college quarterbacks the Giants have, I'll quickly answer this one and move to the next question. The Giants have been scouting quarterbacks. It's been pretty open that Joe Shane is taking at least a look at them. Today's game that he's at, I believe, is Alabama, so no quarterback prospects necessarily there that we're going to be keeping a close eye on. Yeah, he's at Alabama, Kentucky, so no quarterback prospects for today, this Saturday's games, but there are some top 10 picks, primarily on the defensive side of the ball. Edge rusher Dallas Turner, cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I really like, and I think Giants fans should keep an eye on, and offensive tackle J.C. Latham from the Roll Tide. So there are some good prospects, but we do know, Alex, Joe Shane has taken a look at some of these quarterback prospects. He has scouted in-person UNC games, taken a look at Drake Maye. We know that he was at USC's most recent game versus Washington to take a look at both Caleb Williams and Michael Penix Jr. So we don't know who's on the top of their list right now, but we do know that they're making a list. They are scouting these quarterbacks and trying to determine who's 1A, 1B, or 1, 2, 3. They are taking a look at these quarterbacks pretty closely. Joe Shane has been in-person scouting every single weekend. Here's a cool tidbit from Ralph Vacchiano, who, longtime beat writer covering the Giants, said, Joe Shane seems to do more in-person scouting than any Giants GM I've ever covered. And I think that's pretty cool. That excites me here. But we do know that he's taking a look at a lot of the quarterbacks. So, Alex, I'll quickly just kind of get your take on that. Do you think that he's looking at these teams more generally? I mean, I know that there's more than just those quarterback prospects on these teams. Do you think that he's just looking at some of these best football teams and scouting the best players? Or do you think that he's really there primarily searching and trying to make a list of who the best quarterback prospects are in this upcoming draft?
I mean, look, you're always, I think as a GM, you're always looking at everybody, like anyone that stands out. I mean, these guys have been around football for decades. So I think Joe Shane's probably looking at everything collectively, like who stands out to me, what guys, and there's more preliminary stuff, right? I think it's more so like, oh, this guy stood out to me. Let's go and have conversations with him during the draft process. Let's go and work him out. Let's go and, it's a lot of information being compiled here that's then boiled down to like an actual draft chart. But I will say that of course you're looking at the quarterbacks. You know what I mean? Of course, when you're going to see Caleb Williams, you're trying to see if he could be a superstar at the NFL level. You're seeing the traits that you want. Of course, when you go to see Drake Maye or J.J. McCarthy, or Sanders or whoever it might be that could go high in this draft, you're thinking to yourself, well, these guys have what it takes. They have the elements. And look, Joe Shane, for what it's worth, has seen what greatness looks like with Josh Allen, right? He's seen what a great football player can do. He's seen what those qualities look like. He's seen, by the way, that college prospects, and here's the thing that really confused me a lot of people, they think that these college prospects are finished products. Like, oh, I hate Drake Maye. Oh, I hate Caleb Williams. Oh, I hate this guy. I hate that guy. I'm like, they're kids still. They're like 20 years old. Like, they're far from being finished products, 22 years old, some of them, right? They develop at the next level. Like Tom Brady, you think he came in and was immediately great? No, he sat behind, veteran, Drew Bledsoe, whoever it was, and then took over. You look at, how about Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre? You know what I mean? Josh Allen wasn't great in his first season. You know what I mean? Like, was Patrick Mahomes sat behind Alex Smith for a year or something like that? There's stuff that you have to consider here that players don't just walk into the NFL a lot of times and are great. They need that time to transition. They need that time to get a grasp mentally and build the good habits of NFL players, right? If you're a college kid, and Anthony, you know this, you were just in college, it is a different ballgame being a professional football player and a college football quarterback. You are partying, you're hanging, you're messing around, whatever the hell. And then you go to the NFL, and it's a different type of strategy. Like, you got to build a professional caliber strategy and do things a whole different way. Sometimes it takes a full year to do that, let alone learn an offense, let alone, understand the physicality and speed increases across the board. So keep in mind when you're thinking about these prospects, my friends, these guys are not finished products. What you're looking for is those key traits that you can develop around, right? For example, in Caleb Williams, he has those key traits. Like a lot of people say he's like a hero ball type of quarterback. If you can find the balance, and he's got the release. If you watch his release, it's very Aaron Rodgers-esque. It's so quick. If you can mash those things, right, with Caleb Williams specifically, you take his qualities as a hero ball player, quick release, all those things, and you find a balance between being a traditional pocket passer and then not trying to make something crazy happen every single play. Like that's your first resort. Read the defense, get the ball out quick, make efficient decisions. You can find a really good player there. Drake Maye, for example, there's things that obviously, he does amazing. Like he's a, very great arm talent, good at skating the field. Sometimes his feet get a little bit mixed up. Sometimes, his base is a little bit too upright. He doesn't really generate a lot of power from his lower half. There's some things there that you're like, okay, those are things that we will refine at the next level. Those are things we will add to the mix. We're going to make this guy better because we know what's wrong with him. These college coaches, some of them are great, but a lot of them aren't thinking about preparing these guys for the NFL. They're thinking about making sure they win football games so they can keep their jobs and whatever it takes to win football games, whatever style of play is going to help them win the most games, and not necessarily turning these players into NFL-ready prospects. So I feel as though you have to keep it with a grain of salt here in terms of these guys, you're looking for raw qualities, and you're building around them. So I think that if you're Joe Shane, watching all these players, you're looking for those, like almost if you're using Madden as an example, you think about all of those those superstar traits that you have in Madden, like this guy could do that, you're looking for those raw traits that you're saying, okay, that's something that you cannot teach. You cannot teach that quick release. You cannot teach hero ball. But you can build around those variables. You can balance them out, and then you can, infuse them into a much more balanced and quality player. So I feel as though that's what Joe Shea's probably doing here, looking for the translatable traits, and then ways they can build around those. So that's kind of my take on terms of he's looking at everybody, but he's also looking for those key things that stand out in college games of like, okay, that translates to the NFL level. That's something that we could turn into star caliber talent.
Yeah, NFL teams don't draft on production. They don't draft on how finished of a product you are. They draft on what can you do at the next level? How can we develop you? It's all about traits. And when you see certain plays from Caleb Williams, certain plays from Drake Maye, Michael Penix, Bo Nix even, there's certain traits that NFL teams will really like and fall in love with and think, I can develop that into something special. That's what NFL teams draft for. It's not how good you are right now. It's how good can you be. So that's why those freakish athletes, those guys who have those raw traits go high in the draft. It's because they're very moldable pieces of clay, and NFL teams want to know what can we do with you at the next level, not what have you accomplished so far. Here's a question. It's going to be a quick one that I'll answer. Jakey Saltburn on Jakey Saltburn era at Jacob TJ on X. Do you think Mara being removed is somewhat possible? No, it's a 0% chance. The New York Giants are a family-owned business. They've been owned by the Mara family forever, and they always forever will be. In our lifetimes, we will never see the Giants sold, so there's just a quick answer to that. Here's a fun question. I'll give my quick answer to it, and we'll kind of rapid fire some of these remaining takes. Alex, if the Giants go QB in the first round, then what positions do you want to see them draft with our second round picks? Assuming that they stick and pick and grab a QB in the first round, I would like to see them go defense in round 2. I think they need to find the pass rusher. From what I'm seeing early on here, we've got a good core of pass rushing talent in these first 2 rounds, and I think that there should be somebody available in round 2 for the Giants to snag. So I'd like to see a pass rusher in round 2. And yeah, I'd like to see the Giants probably add another offensive weapon to the mix, an outside wide receiver, somebody dynamic if there are available in the second round. A lot of talented second round wide receiver prospects that have come out in recent years. Rasheed Rice, AJ Brown, you name them. So if the Giants go QB in the first round, Alex, they stick and pick and they keep those 2 second round picks, what positions do you have an eye on there?
I mean, if you're looking for second round talent, I'm looking potentially to move up into the back end of that first round in the second round and go after one of the top offensive tackles. Like that's an option, right? That's something that you could consider. Edge rusher. Always prioritize edge rushers. I think that the Giants could probably get a guy with some athletic upside in the second round, a guy that can play outside linebacker, some upside there, and just try and develop him. You know what I mean? I think, Azeez Ojulari, when he was healthy, is a great pure pass rusher. We got the 51st overall pick. You can get good players in the second round, and then, they obviously need some time, but I think long-term you can develop those guys into quality players. Always good to go after cornerbacks. I think we had Deonte Banks and obviously Trey Hawkins in the last draft, so I feel as though we'll probably sign a free agent veteran to pair with those guys. But I would say right now, maybe you want to draft an interior pass rusher to replace like a defensive end, guy that would replace Leonard Williams' role alongside Dexter Lawrence, kind of a big guy in the interior that can also rush the passer. So like right now, I would say obviously offensive line is paramount. But edge rusher is always great. So I'd say offensive tackle, edge rusher, probably neck and neck, like 1A, 1B. Those are the two positions I'd be looking to grab some value. Potentially move back up into the first round to get that fifth year option on the rookie deal for a player. So I think that might be something the Giants may consider.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think offensive tackle will still be a priority for them. I do like the idea of a wide receiver in the second round, though, just because of the hit rate on that position in that round. I think it's really high, so I'd like to see them attack that position in round 2. But what you mentioned there, pass rusher, corner, I know you mentioned that, offensive tackle, those are some big ones. By the way, that was by @ClutchMaster23 on Twitter/X. He's the one who gave us that question to answer. But Alex, I have a couple of questions of my own, a couple topics that I want to bring up here, just get a quick take on, kind of discuss a little bit before we move on from this episode. The first one being the New York Giants legend, that is Victor Cruz, saying, in his opinion, the New York Giants need to draft a quarterback. Now, here's a couple things that I want to add here for context. First of all, Victor Cruz is as loyal to the New York Giants as any former player, any current player. Like, we know what Victor Cruz is. He embodies the Giants way. Giants pride, baby, right? We know that. So to hear him kind of say, I think that the Giants should move on from Daniel Jones draft a quarterback, was a little bit surprising to me. Of course, Eli Manning did an interview as well this week on the Locked On Giants podcast with Patricia Traina. Shout out to her. Eli Manning said, he's expecting Daniel Jones to bounce back next season. They're friends, of course. You know that he's going to say that. But then you hear Victor Cruz, who I thought would kind of be in the same way, like, I'm expecting Daniel Jones to bounce back. No, he gave his honest take, which I can respect and appreciate, said that the Giants should draft a quarterback. Tiki Barber, for what it's worth, also said Daniel Jones is not the future on his radio show this week. So now you have a few Giants former players and legends here kind of speaking out and saying it's time to move on from Daniel Jones, time to go after one of these top quarterback prospects. And I want to know what you think about that. I'll say what I think. I mean, listen, one of the shocking parts about this is Victor Cruz still he technically works for the Giants. Like, he's on the payroll. He's still in the organization. He's got some sort of media job there. He's a recurring guest on some of their shows. He's still involved in that building, and he's even bold enough, despite being on John Mayer's payroll, to say it's time for the Giants to move on and draft a new quarterback. I thought that was bold. I thought that was really interesting, and I thought that did share a little insight that maybe this isn't all just fan conjecture. Maybe there is something more to this. Maybe this is really a possibility for the New York Giants. Like, if they land one of those top 2 picks, they hear the noise, of course. They know what fans are saying, but maybe they are also just realistic in that building and kind of see the writing on the wall in some way. So I don't know. I don't want to kind of make too much out of nothing there. It's just Victor Cruz's opinion, but I think it's worth noting and worth, kind of discussing that Victor Cruz was willing to make that opinion public, despite, being on the Giants payroll and still being involved with the organization. I thought it was really interesting. For what it's worth, I do agree with him. I do think that the New York Giants need to draft a quarterback early in this upcoming draft if they land the top 3 draft selection. If they're picking at 3 and the Bears have the first 2 picks in the draft, I'm moving up to 1 or 2 and I'm drafting whichever quarterback is still there. If I'm the Giants GM, I'm not. I wish I were. That would be sick. But I do think that this is a good time for the Giants to capitalize on a really arguably generational quarterback class. But we'll dive into that way deeper at a further date. But Alex, what do you make of Victor Cruz kind of coming out publicly and saying it's time for the Giants to draft a new quarterback and move on from Daniel Jones?
I mean, look, any logical person is probably thinking that right now, in my opinion, because, I've said this multiple times, and the logic is sound. If you're Brian Daboll, right, and you're Joe Schoen, are you really going to run the risk of Daniel Jones coming back from an ACL tear and bouncing back in a big way? Because if he doesn't bounce back and he struggles, they're out of jobs next year. You know what I mean? 3 years, 2 of them being bad is enough to get yourself fired. And ultimately, like, as someone who, if I put myself in their shoes, and I imagine you guys think about this the same way, if you think about it, drafting a quarterback helps them prolong their jobs exponentially, because now Mara has to give them at least 2 years to build up a new quarterback. So they save their jobs guaranteed. Like, they're safe next year, guaranteed. But Daniel Jones next year does not save their jobs. In fact, if they don't draft a quarterback and they stick with Daniel Jones, it's like a 50-50 shot they get fired. You know what I mean? But a new rookie quarterback locks them in guaranteed. And look, I know it's maybe this is a hot take, maybe it's not, but you better believe that coaches and general manager are thinking about what decisions could get them fired. You know what I mean? Like, that is a decision that could get them fired, not drafting a quarterback this year. So I do believe that it is in their best interest, but let alone their best interest, it's in our best freaking interest. We know the Giants need a new quarterback. Look, Daniel Jones struggled this year to begin with. Coming off an ACL tear, I don't even want to see what that looks like. You know what I mean? I don't even want to go down that road. I don't want to go down the road of being mediocre again and him not feeling confident in his knee and him struggling. I just don't feel like we can sustain this for much longer because you're going to get rid of Daniel Jones after next year at some point. And, I feel like next year the contract is guaranteed. Like, and then what? You're gonna take the out. Like, if you don't take the out on that Daniel Jones deal, it would be freaking franchise crushing. You know what I mean? Because you have a cap hit of like $50 million in 2025, and then again in 2026. You have to move on from him after 2024. You have to. So if you're the Giants and you have to move on from DJ, you have to take the out in that contract. Why the hell are you not drafting a quarterback this upcoming year when you're going to have a guaranteed top 5 pick most likely? You're likely going to be a top 5. You can walk away with Drake Maye or Caleb Williams. It would be the most boneheaded thing to do. So, yes, Victor Cruz saying this. The only reason he's saying it is because it's the most logical thing. Like, it's the thing that makes the most sense. And like you said, Eli Manning's not going to say that because he's buddies with Daniel Jones. He gets it. For goodness sake, we benched his ass for Geno Smith, who ended up being pretty good. But, at the time, obviously was like, what the hell is going on here? So I will say this, though, it's just mind-boggling that people wouldn't think that drafting a quarterback is the right move. Of course it's the right decision.
Yeah, I want to throw in there, you mentioned Geno Smith. I was thinking about this the other day. The most mind-blowing part of this whole equation is Ben McAdoo was right, and the Giants had a franchise quarterback on their roster in Geno Smith, and I think that's fucking nuts. Like, pardon my French, but we look back on that time with such disgust over what Ben McAdoo did because, we're all Eli fanboys and we love him, and I'm one of them. Like, I was so passionately pissed off when Eli Manning was benched. But, like, looking back on it, Geno Smith was a franchise quarterback, and if we had a little bit more of an open mind as Giants fans and we gave that guy a shot, the Giants wouldn't have drafted Daniel Jones. We wouldn't be in this position. We would have a franchise quarterback in Geno Smith, and we wouldn't even be questioning the future of this quarterback position. I know Geno Smith isn't having necessarily the best season right now, but yeah, he's proven to be a franchise quarterback. Is he a Super Bowl caliber quarterback? Probably not. So maybe we would have been moving on, finding a young quarterback to draft anyway. But I just think that's so wild looking back on it in retrospect. I still hate Ben McAdoo for benching Eli, and I still think the way he handled it was the problem, not the fact that he benched him for Geno Smith. It was the way he did it. His press comments, all that stuff, but it just blows my mind. I think it's crazy that the Giants really did have a franchise quarterback in Geno Smith on their roster looking back on it. But that's the luck of the New York Giants, right? That's what we've been experiencing. Also, I agree with all your takes there on the Giants, looking at these quarterbacks, former players speaking out on it. Agree with you there. For what it's worth, before we depart, I'll leave you all with one hot take that I have right now. It's early, it could change, but Drake Maye is my current QB1 in this upcoming draft class, and I'm super excited on this channel to dive into that. Discuss him versus Caleb Williams versus Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix. It's going to be really exciting as Giants fans looking at some of these quarterback prospects. I think it's a lot of fun breaking them down, having good debates and conversations about them. But for where I sit right now, my QB1 is UNC's Drake Maye, and we'll dive into that more in future episodes. But make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on all of these topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.